Hello?
Hi, Carolyn.
Yeah, it's me. I
Hi,
made it.
Carolyn. Great. Well, I'm looking at our list of who's in the room, and it looks like we have everybody present. Jim, I was thinking, I realized one thing I didn't put on the agenda that we've been doing with the other committees when we're kicking things off is starting off with like a quick sort of what we might do, what we're doing a little differently because we're in the Zoom meeting. So if it works for you, once we sort of call the meeting to order, if you want, I'm happy to do a quick sort of just a quick points on things like we're going to do. We'll try and do roll call votes so that we know that someone isn't, just not being heard, or just some little tips like that. That works for you.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
So I guess we're ready to start if everybody's here. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, the May 7th meeting of the South Kingstown Historic District Commission is called to order. Let's see, Ms. Griswold.
Here?
Mr. Martinez.
Here.
Mr. Youngkin.
Here.
Ms. Stedman.
Here.
Ms. Underhagen.
Here.
Ms. De Silva.
Here.
Mr. Garfield is here. Can we have a motion to approve the February 6th minutes?
Motion to approve.
In a second.
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 All in favor? Or do we need to go through, Kayla?
Yeah, so one of those things that we're finding is helpful in Zoom is if either when you make the motion, just state your name first. So say, if whoever moved, Andrew Martinez moving to, or Jim, for you to sort of acknowledge who the motion and second were from, if you are comfortable doing it by voice. That is a helpful thing we have realized in motions and seconds. And then the other piece is, when we do any votes on anything, we're finding that it is better to do them by roll call vote, just to make sure if somebody, the Historic District Commission, it's very unlikely you guys are going to have a contentious approval of your minutes, but either way, we're being advised that the thing to do is to just go through and do a roll call vote anytime we make those votes. So I'll stop there.
All right, we'll do so this is a roll call for the approval of minutes. Griswold, either aye or nay.
Aye.
Martinez.
I approve.
Youngkin.
Approve.
Stedman.
Approve.
Underhagen.
Jim, I'm not voting on anything tonight because I haven't actually been sworn in. So we just decided I would vote.
Okay, Shantia. De Silva,
Approve.
Garfield approved. All right, the motion's carried. The next item is correspondence and public comments. And Ayala, if you'd like to make any comments.
Sure. So we do not have any correspondence for you all today. I don't believe the only people we have on the call that I see for members of the public are Matt Harrington, one of our applicants, and Erica Luke, who's here to talk about another agenda item. So those will likely be caught then. But that being said, there are some phone numbers on the call. I think I'm connecting them to members, but if not, if there are people who want to give public comment who are not members of the commission or have anything here, now is a reasonable time to do so. All right, hearing none at that point. That is sort of all we have for correspondence and public comment.
All right, the next item on the agenda is new business certificate of appropriateness for 2557 Kingstown Road. Proposed demolition of an outbuilding, repair of an existing porch, including sill and corner post, and repair of doorposts and sills, and repair of existing doorposts and sills. Matthew P. Harrington. Matt, I don't know if you would like to have anything to say about this at this point, or if anybody has any questions for Matt.
I have a question, Carolyn. I was just wondering how old that shed is. It may be in here, but I missed it.
We don't know how old it is.
It's not, it isn't part of the original. It wasn't built at the same time as the house, in other words.
No, it's at the very back of the property.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
I noticed a chimney in the that building. So was there a fireplace of sorts in there?
No, it is not there now, and I've never seen it. I saw an old photo at the library in which it had an old pot-bellied stove. But that, as I say, I've never seen it. It was sealed up. The interior of the chimney inside is cinder block. So that's why, the chimney was obviously rebuilt or installed much later because it's all cinder block inside and then brick on top. And in fact, just brick. It's cinder block all the way up and it's brick around the outside of it. So.
Okay.
We tried, we spent 2 years. We had 3 rigging companies come out because our original idea was we would lift it up, see if we could put a foundation down, settle it on a new foundation. And 2 of them came out and said they wouldn't touch it because they felt that if they attempted to take it up, it would just collapse of its own weight. The third one was very positive in the beginning and gave me a really good price. And said, well, we'll do it. This was last May. Well, we'll definitely do this thing. And then a month went by and 2 months went by. And when I called him up, he said, I've rethought it. I don't want the responsibility of lifting that up because I just think that it will, it's just flat strips of wood. He said, I think it's just going to fall if we try to do this, and you're going to spend $5,000 to lift up wood that's going to fall down. So 3 guys up, 3 guys down.
Yeah, it's too bad that it got to the condition that it is in now, because it's kind of a neat and unusual structure. Would have been nice to be able to keep it, but I know the last time I looked at it, it was in pretty bad condition.
Yeah, it's that, you know, it's I don't know whether they're maybe 6x6. They basically just laid the sills right in the dirt. They're not even on stone or cinder block or brick or anything. It's just sill on dirt. And you can see on the one side where it just collapses and collapses, eating away the moisture, the bugs, whatever it is, just eating it away over time.
Yeah, I think unfortunately at this point, it probably is too far gone to save.
I have a couple questions. It's Richard from Matt. Are you before us asking for a demolition approval of the demolition, or is this in your mind just like an advisory or pre-application or getting information?
Well, two things. It's got to come down, and the second thing is we'd like to replace it. And I had thought by this time I might have some idea, and that's why I think I put in it pre-consultation or whatever.
Yes. Yeah. I think I saw that in your write-up.
Yeah, we want to replace it, but I don't have an architect yet. And what I've been doing is going around the village. In fact, just before this meeting, we've been in people's backyards. So we just were in Gil's backyard looking at various structures. I'll tell you, you know, I was in Gil's backyard and we were thinking, well, maybe we want to copy his barn in some way and use that. Or we were behind the art association, but they're more modern structures. So looking around the village to say, okay, basically what can we just copy? Because if it's already here, then, you know, we don't have any grand idea of, you know, something modern or new or innovative. So right now I have to tell you that our leading idea is we'd just like to, we photographed his barn, and I actually probably didn't put it in the paper, but our idea was to duplicate Gil's barn. I think it's a little bigger for our property, so it'd have to be reduced proportionally and recited because of the way it looks. But so that was our idea about a pre-consultation. I don't have a form. I don't have anything to give you to say, this is what we're thinking.
Right. Matt, you've done such a good job with the application itself. You've spelled out all of the attempts you've made to try to save it, given us that part of the information that we need to go through a demolition. But this one of our guidelines is 71, which talks about that approvable plan for the site afterwards. And I think you get that. It sounds like you have already thought that through a little bit. So if this is fine with me, if we can, if it's like a pre-application, and then we can give you our thoughts about the demolition, and then you can come back with a plan for the new building. But we can't, I'm not sure we can really approve a demolition without seeing that first, that plan for its replacement. That's just my feeling as a board member.
Well, I guess I don't see that I'm required to put anything up in other words, I think if I wanted to put something up, but I don't think the law requires me to replace the building. So, and I'm not trying to be confrontational. What I'm suggesting is, so it would seem to me that you could have two separate things. One is the building, because of course, if the building is dangerous and needs to come down, it needs to come down. And maybe all I want to do is leave a meadow back there. In other words, I don't think an historic demolition requires a replacement structure.
No, the standard 71 doesn't talk about, it just talks about what you plan to do with the site. It doesn't require you to rebuild. Just if we have a better idea of what you intend to do with the site afterwards. Um, you can imagine that in historic districts, and I know this is a small and minor building perhaps, but we are concerned about what goes into a slot if a building is demolished. And if it's a new building, or if it's site improvement or landscaping, whatever. I mean, I suppose we could discuss, sanctioning a demolition with the provision that the site will be unused and landscaped. But we wouldn't want, I mean, that's part of the deal, is that in some cases people demolish and just leave the site completely unimproved, just abandoned kind of. That happens in other districts. So I think that's why this standard is in here. So maybe you can tell us that the site would be improved with grass or landscaping until such time as you're able to replace the building.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was thinking improvement in terms of, yeah, what's going to happen is it'll be removed. It's going to be sodded. Shrubbery will be put in because there's a back property there. So we'll probably put in some mountain laurel or rhododendron as sort of a screen from the back. And then, then I figured the back and forth with the HDC and architects would take at least a year. But I think the goal is that, within 6 months to a year, if we could get an agreed plan for the construction of a barn-like building. It wouldn't be a barn. I don't have horses or anything. So, but it would be something that would be in character with everything else around here. So it wouldn't be a big vacant hole that would go back there. It'll be sodded. It'll be shrubbed to put some sort of barrier, as they say. And since around here, most, in the back of the yard, it's mountain laurel. It's, I don't like, what do you call it? Arbor vitae, that kind of, Home Depot landscaping. So we're thinking rhododendron, mountain laurel, maybe a boxwood or something like that stuck back there. And then drafting a plan, getting somebody in, surveying the dimensions. I think it's 24 by 24, but working with whatever that is. And as I say, I haven't been in Gill's barn yet, except for several years ago. So basically that's what we're looking at. We're looking at saying, we just want to have a twin building next door.
Okay.
Does anyone else have comments or questions?
This is Karen. I don't have any comments or questions.
I think, this is Carolyn. I think that sounds like a reasonable approach.
Andrew, I agree. I'll miss that unique roof line. I think that's kind of cool and one of a kind, but I understand the condition of the building, and I endorse what it is you intend to do there. So.
This is Linda. I definitely think that the building needs to be taken down. Maybe come back to us with whatever you have in the future.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Well, I think since Matt has 3 items on the certificate, perhaps we should vote for each item. So if we could have a motion to approve the demolition with the condition that the site will be improved and that any any future building naturally would come before us. So I guess if somebody could make a motion for that.
I'll move that, Carolyn.
In a second,
Second.
all right. I guess we'll go through the roll call to vote. Griswold,
Aye.
Martinez,
Aye.
Yunkin,
Aye.
Stedman,
Aye.
De Silva,
Aye.
Garfield, aye. Motion's carried.
I'd like to make a second motion,
Okay, Rich.
and that is that Matt, I hope you're agreeable to this, that we ask that perhaps Erica, Luke, or someone else document the building before it's taken down with photographs, and those photographs be housed at the Suffolk County History Center. Erica is going to be talking about later on about a survey of historic properties in Kingston, and this might be just one of the things that they do first or quickly while the building still stands. Is that agreeable to you, Matt, that we get some record photographs of it?
Not sure there's anything to see.
Well, there are things that in the village that have been lost over the years and we don't have records of, and you never know how valuable that might be in the future to actually know that the building was there at one time.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be a big deal. They don't have to be several photographs.
Yeah, I mean, it's the floor is very unstable, so we'll just have to wear snowshoes.
Well, they would take them from the outside.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
I think getting inside might be a little too dangerous.
Yeah. I have tons of photos, so.
Yeah, and the photographs that you submitted are very good as well. I mean,
Yeah.
Those are digital, I believe, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Right. So we already have these.
Yeah.
And these could be transferred to the History Center too.
Yeah.
Sort of like getting a sense of where it sits on the property, how far back, in relationship to the house.
Right.
So would this constitute a motion or just a request of Matt here?
Well, somehow I think I'd like it to be something that happens, if it's possible to word it that way, a requirement, because that's one of the things that we do ask for in demolitions, that that somehow we have a record of what was there. We want to have documentation.
I would say if you all want that to be something that is followed through with, it should be a motion. Otherwise, it's just a recommendation from Rich to Matt. To take it to, if you want it, if you all agree with Rich and you'd like to see that become a recommendation or requirement of the HDC to see that happen,
I would second Richard's motion to ask to require the documentation prior to demolition. It's Andrew.
All right, let's have a vote on that then. Griswold,
Aye.
Martinez,
Aye.
Yunkin,
Aye.
Stedman,
He's on mute. Linda, you're on mute.
okay.
Aye.
Karen.
Aye.
All right, the motion's carried.
Thank you.
The next part of that motion was the repairing the porch, which is spelled out pretty well in the application. I don't know if anybody has questions about that, or I think, Matt, you know, you know what's required. We want to see everything that's there now to be reproduced. Anything that that would be any new fabric that it's reproduced. You know, a reproduction of what is there now.
Yeah, you know, it's kind of surprising the fascia there is actually in pretty good shape. It's, as you can see, it's really just the post itself, and the beam underneath it are really rotted. But all that other stuff is in reasonably good shape that can be, I think there'll be some epoxy work that needs to be done to kind of level off some of the rough edges. But with respect to the porch, the fascia's in pretty good shape. Even the slat, I don't know what you call them, the floorboards of the porch, if you look at that very first one, that's even in some pretty decent shape. It's just everything underneath it is soft.
All right, well, it looks like a pretty straightforward structural repair. And it looks as though some of the steps, probably the treads on the steps look like they need a little work.
Yeah, and they're Home Depot. They're not historic, because that's I guess whoever my predecessor. You can see they're stringers that were store-bought, and so that's that Home Depot rounded staircase treads. So they're not particularly historic, but they're easy to replace. That riser's just pine.
All right. Any other questions?
So a question, I think you're going to replace it in kind, right? All of the replacement material.
Yes.
Okay. So did you want to use other wood than the pine and the Home Depot wood, or what?
No, I mean, no, I was just going to say that if you can see the you know, the steps are not attached to the house, that obviously, yeah, they look like they've, I guess over the years, people have just built separate steps. And so when I flipped those over, I saw that that's not terribly old wood. That's machine made wood, you know,
right.
That they obviously got. I don't know where they got from Home Depot or Arnold's. It's nothing special there. The original wood, or I guess the historic wood, is that which is on the porch itself.
Right.
The steps are just modern.
Right.
Because you can even see that they're basically, what do you think, 1x6s maybe on the steps. So it's decking material.
Right. I guess my point is that if you wanted to use better wood than this, it would last longer. That's fine with us.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, it's fine with me.
Well, that's where I'm going with the next one here, the front door.
Well, why don't I make a motion to approve, grant a certificate of appropriateness for this porch repair and steps, rebuilding the steps, or new steps to replicate what was there. That
And this is
includes
Karen
replacing
DeSilva.
the
I'll
post.
second that. Oops, you're still going.
I want to cite, I think we better cite the standards involved.
I think it's 44, right?
I'm just checking. Bear with me a moment. My manual fell apart, so.
I think it's 44. Page
Yeah.
19, number 44.
Right.
Yeah, he's got them listed on the application.
All right. So why don't we go with 44? And there we have it. There's a second, right?
Karen DeSilva will second it.
All right, voting on this. Griswold,
Aye.
Martinez,
Aye.
Yunkin,
Aye.
Stedman,
Aye.
De Silva,
Aye.
Garfield, aye. The motion's carried. The next item is the front door, the work on the front door surround. Which is mostly rot repair.
Yeah, and this is probably self-inflicted wound. This is new. This is since the fire, and this was the replacement that was done at the fire. So these posts you see there are, the door posts are only 15 years old, and that sill is only 15 years old. And it's clearly telling me that I need to reinstall the gutters up top. Because as I say, there's 200-year-old wood in the house that on the outside of this house that's in better shape than this. So it's just a function of the fact that the water's pouring down from above. So I've got the gutters were taken down about 20 years ago. So I got to put the gutters back up. And this wood here is pine, and I'm thinking, and this is what I was going to ask about. I don't know, what do you think about oak? Do you think, I'm trying to think of something that, no, that's
No.
I
No.
have pine up again.
No, there are some eastern species that they're not actual mahogany, but they're similar to mahogany. They have very good rot resistance. They're easy to tool. They make, it's easy to make moldings with them, and they will last 10 times longer than the wood. The pine that's available now is it's like balsa wood.
Yeah, it's really soft.
Yeah, it's fast growing. It doesn't last. So I would recommend doing that. Were you going to replace the threshold as well?
Yeah, that's what I mean. That was an oak threshold. That's 15 years old. I painted and varnished that myself. So, and it's soft and rotted through. So,
yeah, you'd be better off to replace that with something other than oak also. Anything that you're redoing down there that's going to get wet, you wouldn't want to use oak or pine.
Okay. I was, you know, I,
How, it looks like the moldings, are they in bad shape at the bottom there? It's hard to tell from the photograph.
yeah, that's all pine too. They're not in terrible shape, but they're rotted as well. What that is just a straight piece. So there's the big piece behind it, and then what they did was they put a 1x4, and then about an inch off the 1x4 basically ran a concave molding. So it's basically, and made a frame around it. So it's basically a big flat piece, and then a piece that's center, and then that little concave molding that went around it that was just cut out of pine. It's all pine.
Yeah.
So I've got a question, Matt. It's Rich. What were you going to replace the whole thing, or just scarf in the bottom pieces? How were you going to actually? I mean, how much of this gets removed and replaced?
Well, see, I hadn't really given that much. My assumption was I was going to take it up to the top. You know, what are the I don't call them finials. What do you call them at the top of the very first level of?
I mean, the capitals.
Capitals, yeah.
On either side of the transom.
Yeah, exactly. On either side of the transom there, because it's all one big piece that runs down. I don't have a particular, and I only thought that because I thought if I just cut them off at the bottom and there'd be this seam there, it might look weird. But I don't particularly care, quite frankly. It's, you know.
Well, tell us, Matt. Tell us a little bit more about this doorway and the fire. I'm not familiar with what you're describing. Is the entire doorway and the surround all the way up to the transom, is that all new stuff that was added at some time?
Yes, everything up to the 2557 is new.
As of 15 years ago, new, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. So that was all rebuilt. That window is not. That window, the window, the transom window was there, but all of the surrounding frame was replaced.
Wow! And they replicated what was originally the style of this.
Yeah. So that was what that looked like. And they did it basically, as you can see, just by piecing together basic, you know, off the rack molding. Not really, the underneath the capitals, what do you call it when it's the concave molding like that?
Well, they're sort of like, they would be referred to as pilasters in architectural terms, but what's odd about them is that I mean, they are kind of odd. And so I'm just wondering if there's a historical photograph or a photograph of this doorway before the fire that would give you some more information about maybe the treatment. I mean, where I'm going is that if you're going to be replacing all of this wood, which I'm not saying is a bad thing, it may be good to go back to and revisit the historical photographs to make absolutely sure what you're doing is, I mean, why not take this time to actually be careful about sort of reproducing what was there before the fire that was original. This looks like it was attempt, but it may not be really true to what was there originally. And now you have the opportunity to actually do that.
My guess is it was simpler. It was probably like what's on either side of the transom light.
Yeah, without the, you know what? I actually, now that you say that, I wonder if they got fancy because I didn't do this. Yeah, what you see above that transom line, that was what was there. So that's what they were duplicating. They felt they were duplicating. So I I don't know. Maybe that was just straight flat wood right to the bottom. And I'll
Well,
have
you'd
to,
be sort of
I'll have to
kicking your
grab
head.
some family photos and see.
Yeah, it would be
out
sort
there.
of kicking yourself in the head if in fact it was, you went to all this effort to duplicate something that's like 15 years old.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know,
It
I
looks
did have,
kind of incongruous, actually, in some respects, because it's very delicate supports, pilasters for what's up above. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's almost top heavy.
you know what I could do? I mean, this I don't, look, it's wet. I can get through the summer on this one, but you know, what I could do is see if I can dig up some photos, or maybe at the Historical Association, dig up some photos, see what was there. I mean, if this is what was there, then this is what we'll replace. But if there was something else
Yeah.
there, maybe I'll just come back with that.
Yeah, that would be
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, my guess is it
All right.
was simpler than what was put on after the fire.
Yeah. All right. So why don't I withdraw that one, and I'll come back. As I say, I'm sure I have photos of the kids or something standing in front of the door at some point, or the door itself. And
And if
And
you
see what-
don't, that's fine. I think that it's. I think from my perspective, you're absolutely headed in the right direction. It's just a matter of the choice of the wood that you would use and how much of it you want to. But if you say that it was the only original part is up at the top of the transom, then it would seem that you could go and do a lot of replacement of those. The enframement, the door enframement below that, and just get it right in terms of the style.
yeah, that's fine. As I say, I have, it's so simple. I have no attraction or agenda with it one way or the other.
Right. Right.
If that was what was there, then that's fine. It's not significant to me in any way. I haven't fallen in love with this extra trim, if it is in fact extra trim. If it isn't,
Right.
then we'll put it back up as is. If it was what was above, then we'll put up what was above.
Mm.
All right, well, that sounds like a good plan. Do a little research and come back to us. So I guess we're done with this.
I'll take that one back. Sorry.
All right, Matt.
Are you okay, Matt?
Yeah.
Good.
Okay. Then.
Thank you for the thorough application and the great photos.
Great. No, my pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah,
And
good job.
Matt, you'll receive a certificate of appropriateness for the things that were voted on tonight from me by early next week. It'll be signed by Jim, but we'll get that to you early
Right.
next week.
And then the other thing I'll get for August, right? Is that the
Yes,
next?
yep.
Yep. All right. So that'll give
Next
it
meeting date is August, and as long as you have something to us to me about 10 days in advance, we'll queue you up for that.
Yeah, that's fine. I hope the only thing, there was something else, but it was small. I can't remember what it was. So there might be two things for next. Sorry, I'm rebuilding here. So,
Great.
So
All
I
right.
think, yeah. Okay.
Always a pleasure to see you.
All right.
Good luck with it.
Thanks. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
All right, the next item on the agenda is a discussion of the efforts by the South County History Center to create a comprehensive photographic inventory. Do we need to wait for somebody to join us here? Or-
You know what, Jim? We have Erica Luke is here with us. So I'll just sort of cue Erica up very quickly. So Erica and I had spoken sometime in the middle of the COVID pandemic. I believe it was April, but it might have been March. About the project they're undertaking, and we thought it would be interesting to bring that conversation to you all and see if there were specific pieces of Erica's project that would interest you all to see happen in a particular way, or anything sort of symbiotically beneficial to both the Historic District Commission and her work. So with that, I'll just hand it over to Erica to give you an idea of what she's working on and sort of see what input you all want to give her on what might be of value or interest to you all in the survey or photographic survey work she's planning to do up there.
So hi, everyone. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Okay, thank
Yep.
you. So we're very thankful that we've had some grant funding from 1772 Foundation. Thank you, Rich, for helping us out with that, to take on this project. What we're looking at is, and I think Matt's requests were really helpful illustration of what this project could do. What we're hoping to do is compile a photographic record of the entire district and doing the modern day photos and then also going back in historic photos. And we think it's particularly important to do, the earliest photos of the district possible, but also try to capture that 1950s wave of colonial revival that made some impacts into the district. The idea is to take these photographs together to also compile a list of resources, including maps and earlier surveys and things like that. Basically, we would end up with a document that would property by property say, here are some photos, and here are the other photos that are available at the History Center. Here are the other photos that if they're somewhere else. And so that it would help property owners like Matt when they're trying to figure out a project, or the HDC when you're evaluating potential certificates of appropriateness. We're also potentially, if the funding will allow, the hope would also be to reach out to property owners. We know that a lot of them have photographs on their own, and they also have information about their properties that a lot of times isn't captured anywhere else. So we'd want to try to capture that as well. So in terms of the Historic District Commission, you guys know the district better than anyone. And if there are particular historic elements or historic documentation that you'd be particularly interested in, or you would find particularly helpful, it would be great to have that information.
Erica, can I ask you a question, sort of as maybe a starting point on this? Is your plan to document sort of the principal structures, the primary structures more, or are you thinking about sort of site characteristics and site features as well? I'm thinking a bit about the Harrington Shed as being, or outbuilding as being one of those. So I was curious if your scope right now was going to hit on things like stone walls, fences, other sort of site features that might be of value.
Yes. So basically, my plan is to use the historic district regulations as kind of a guide to, these are the things that fall within your jurisdictions. That includes, the trees, the walls, fences, all of those things, and trying to photograph as much of that as possible, what is in the existing, what's existing right now. I hope to be able to also document outbuildings and things like that on properties, and seek permission from property owners to hopefully do that.
Just a disclosure here, I'm on the board of the 1772 Foundation, and we funded this project. So I'm not sure whether I should recuse myself or not. We're just having a discussion, so maybe it doesn't matter. Kayla, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think that because there's no formal action for it, or we're not talking about something that could benefit you directly one way or the other, really. It's more of a discussion of what's a useful resource. be happy to have you participate. We're not making any decisions on it. Really, it's a project separate from the Historic District Commission. So Rich, any thoughts you have, I think are perfectly acceptable to share.
Well, I can tell you, if everybody else is okay with my participation, I can tell you that, and speak up if you aren't okay with it. I can tell you that there was some concern about Rhode Island DOT finally improving 138 through Kingston Village in some respects. And also we had heard, or I had heard through the grapevine at the university, that it was an idea to radically improve the entrance to the university on Upper College Road. And that both of these projects could have an effect on Kingston Village. And there would be, with the DOT projects, there would be other consultants involved, probably looking at the historic features, but may not be at a level that we just don't know at what level they would be. And of course, the design landscape features and the historic fences and walls and trees along 138 would be, the hitching posts and other things like that could be subject to change or modification. What's interesting about the streetscape is that it appears that there was work done when the sidewalks were installed, the brick sidewalks, and some earlier sidewalks and some more recent sidewalks. So there's sort of like layers of material in the streetscape that would be wise to know more about, I think, and share that information with whomever.
Yeah, I wonder, Erica, if you're taking on this project, and who knows if it gets revisited, it might not be 20 years before it's revisited. Is this time to do something like drone photography to kind of, I'm interested in the layout of sites, and you just never know where old foundations are or where things have changed on a property over hundreds of years. And, the way to read all those elements in relation to each other, stone walls, other buildings, sometimes you can't really appreciate that unless you see it from a few steps back. So I'm kind of interested if this is an opportunity to do something like that.
Yeah, that's a very interesting idea. We don't have a drone ourselves, but I'm sure that we could reach out to someone in the community and hopefully get that those photographs. That's a great idea.
I think this is a great idea, both, obviously for the moment, right, to see where things are. And to your point, Andrew, that's an interesting, an additional interesting view, right, of where things are today or were. And then also the look back to those time periods is incredible body of work for this, especially for this Historic District Commission, but also for the greater, broader community and property owners. So it's great work. Looking forward.
Thanks, us too.
So
yeah, and we, the Mars collection, the Ken Mars collection that we accepted a few years ago, that has more than 25,000 photographs, primarily of South Kingstown from the 1960s up to the early 2000s, is also going to be a great resource for us to, really get a broader view of how the streetscape has changed over time. And another thing that Rich and I were speaking before about this project, another thing I kind of realized is that oftentimes these projects come before you for approval, but there's no documentation of the project once it's complete. And so you don't, if I went back through all of the HDC records, it's going to have the befores, but never the afters. And so that's another important thing for us to capture.
Mm-hmm. Will this
Yeah,
inventory
good idea.
exist as a online electronic database, or what will the output be for this?
So it depends on the volume of the material that we're able to collect. At a minimum, it will be something that's like a finding aid, which is basically a document that lays out information about resources that are available, kind of a map, a narrative map to tell people, you know, these are the pieces of information that are out there. This is where you would find them. If you know, if it's feasible, it would be ideal to create something that is much broader, and then that way it would be accessible online and not just, you know, coming into the center.
Mm-hmm.
Erica, what's your timeline on this undertaking, the project?
So I think we're looking at doing some of the preliminary work now, and of course I'm happy to go and photograph Matt's barn. It's in Kingston regularly anyway, but I think we're just trying to get a better sense of where we are in terms of the material that's already collected. The center has a lot of photographs, but unfortunately over the years they've either been miscatalogued or they haven't been cataloged at all. And so we want to get a better sense of what do we actually have, and then try to figure out where are the gaps, and hopefully through outreach to some of the property owners and just generally to people in town, we'll be able to bring some more of those resources together.
Do you have an idea on when you, I'm thinking about whether just when you would anticipate the project sort of being done. I'm honestly curious about sort of keeping it in the back of my mind to when it is done, bring it back in front of the Historic District Commission so everyone can see the resource that's getting put together there. So I was just curious if it was sort of a 6-month project or a year project, or still figuring that out.
It's probably a 6-month project. That's what, and it's thankfully it's something we can do even through all of the current craziness. So so hopefully it's a 6-month project. You know, I guess it just depends. If we end up finding something really fantastic, it's possible we could take a little bit longer so that we could, you know, further investigate. But probably about 6 months is about right.
Well, I think it's a great project, and it'd be also great if it can be a first step and an example that we could take to other areas of town as well. If, you know, build on this and do something similar for Main Street properties, for instance. So yeah, I think it's great.
No, I agree. Look forward to seeing where you go with it.
Great. Well, if anything else comes to mind, or if you have historic photos that you'd like to share, you know, you can always reach out to me directly after the meeting or anytime.
And I think I'll offer sort of from the planning department side of things, Erica, if there's anything we can assist you with at any point, you know, we don't have great photographic records at all the way you do, but if there's outreach to property owners, if you do want to get on a property, you're trying to do some mailings, you're wondering if we have a relationship with somebody or anything, always give me a call. I'm happy to do whatever sort of help we can to you on the project.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Erica. That sounds great. All right. The next item is old business, and it's a discussion about development of the revolving loan fund.
All right, so this one, I put this on the agenda, and I think you all probably noticed in the fact that there was not a wealth of information in a packet of material on it. It is really here with an honest disclaimer from me that I have not been able to put much more work into this since we met last in February, given sort of the other priorities that have been going on, learning how to host Zoom meetings being one of them, and sort of other pieces we've been working out in town hall related to the health pandemic. But that being said, I do have a little bit of an announcement on this. And then I was curious to just have a quick discussion on sort of, I want to gauge, I think our last meeting was our first time we sort of broached the topic, but I wanted to see if we can get kind of a gauge on how interested the HDC is as a whole, and also how interested individual members are. I'm curious whether or not, largely curious whether or not how the HDC's meeting schedule is quarterly, more or less. And so it's quarterly is sort of a hard period of time to make progress on a project. And so I'm curious whether or not there's another way we want to think about working this through. I'm wondering honestly whether or not you all wanted to think about having a little subcommittee or working group to work on this a little bit outside of the standard quarterly HDC meetings or whatnot. I honestly just wanted to have a discussion with you all about how high of a priority this is for you and how you'd sort of like to work with us through that. I'm going to start with my announcement and then I'll open up those questions. My sort of update for you all is that the idea of this revolving loan fund is something that I have been speaking to the town manager about since a bit before I brought it up in February, but it's something that he has seemed very supportive of as well. It's something that, to repeat myself from February a little bit, I see as very sort of important to the way that South Kingstown continues to develop. I've been with you all for 3 years now, and in those 3 years, I've noticed very much the tensions that exist when you have a community that has deep roots, old history, and a lot of development pressure at the same time. And I think that is why the revolving loan fund seems important to me, is because it seems very important to me that we figure out how we continue to support in proactive ways, how we really help people keep historic properties when the pressures for them to be changed are strong, and properties to be redeveloped for other things are very, very strong in South Kingstown. Speaking with other planners and municipalities, we are a very high pressure development community, but we're also a community that's very attached to our history and doesn't want to lose that. And so it's important to me to be a good planner for you all and to start to think about how we keep those needs to not be exclusive of each other, so that our development doesn't eclipse the history of what we were. And the revolving loan fund to me seems to be one tool to help us sort of do that. And so that's kind of where my interest in it has been. And I've had those discussions with town leadership as well beyond me. And that is something that I've had support in. So I think with that, we did have some discussions a bit with the Village Trust, which is a local nonprofit. They actually came forward to the town council during budget season and asked if they could be involved in the idea of starting one of these revolving loan funds, understanding that the structure of a revolving loan fund depends on, well, maybe not depends on, but principally or more often than not is not the municipality running that program, but a 501c3 authorized to do so with the right structures behind it. And so we know that the town side can only go so far in that, but we need a partner on the outside to do it. And so we did have some discussions with the Village Trust, who seemed interested in doing that. They did come forward to the town council during budget season and actually ask for a little bit of money, I think it was $3,000, to consider that, to basically give a little bit of seed money from the municipal budget to help sort of start exploring that. And that request was actually not passed by the town council, but I want to speak about that a little bit because the request was not passed by our town council because of a lack of interest in a revolving loan fund or a lack of support for figuring out ways to keep our historic properties intact and in character as they have been. It was more related to wanting to see a further along proposal of what this revolving loan fund would be and how that relationship would work. It was more or less the comments made by the councilors when that vote was taken were related to, we would be welcome to see something like this come back, but we want to understand a little bit more how this works. And so I think that two things. One, I think that there are multiple nonprofits who might be interested in doing this. I do not think that there is only the one who has sort of come forward already and expressed some interest, but I say it more to say that sort of even beyond staff level, the council seems supportive of it. The idea has been introduced to them as well, that this is something we'd be interested in seeing happen. So that is kind of my update to you all. And then I really want to open it up to you all to say, what do you think about it? I think that there are people on this call who are more knowledgeable than I am about revolving loan funds, which is one of the things I appreciate most about the Historic District Commission. And I would just sort of like to hear what your thoughts are on how we do this. I've been floated the idea very quickly a second ago of maybe a subcommittee if there are people who want to work on this a little bit more proactively than our normal meeting schedule and a little bit outside of those confines, we could consider something like that. But with that, I want to sort of open it up to what you all are thinking or where your interests are.
Well, I'm, based on discussions we've had since I've been on the council, I think we need every tool available to incentivize people to take on historic restoration. So anything that promotes that, and I'm all for it. I think what would the criteria be? We'd have to have a set of criteria so people know the playing field as to what gets approved and what doesn't, or what kind of applications are considered. So yeah, whether we build on what we have existing for our guidelines or not, but I guess, do you have models in mind that have been set up in other towns that we could look at? Or is this really new territory?
It's very new territory to me. I've been speaking a bit with the planner in Westerly about Westerly's experience in their revolving loan fund. And in honesty, their municipal planning department has not been terribly involved in that process. I had hoped to sort of get a lot more information out of the brain dump I had called their planners asking to get, and really got an understanding of how an outside agency is running it, and that they were very peripherally involved. So I haven't had the opportunity to make that outreach to their revolving loan fund and talk about it with the entity who's actually running it. Providence has a very, very robust revolving loan fund. That one, if you remember, we spoke about it briefly in February at the February meeting, but that one, there's certain things that they prioritize. To your point, Andrew, about what is it exactly that's being supported, how do you decide which projects? There's a lot of information in there, and they've done a lot of work in trying to support projects that further other goals for them. They have benefits if the project results in affordability for housing, so that it's not actually gentrifying or pushing out people from properties. They have other ways that they've tried to align it with other sort of goals that have been found to be in keeping with their plans. But we're largely at the beginning here, and so the first step in doing this is sketching out what that program might look like, and that's work that I can do, but I do it best if I think of it as working alongside a couple of other people on it. I'm happy to sketch things out and bring them forward, but my thought really is that if there are people who want to be working on it more, or if the whole HDC wants to be working on it more, we might want to think about meeting a little bit more frequently than May, and then again in August, and one more time in the fall, to just see progress happen on it. I think means meeting more than 4 times a year.
Well, luckily the 1772 Foundation is one of the largest players in revolving loan funds nationally. And at our meeting I think it was in late January, the board approved funding of, I think, over 24 revolving funds across the country. And that was just one grant cycle. So there is a lot of information available about how these funds work, and they work in very small communities and large communities. and they are very specific really to their own little communities in terms of what they do, sort of like development funds being made available through a nonprofit, acting sort of like a bank to circulate these funds through basically other entities that are commercial or residential, and they're restoring buildings and saving structures that are in jeopardy and doing all kinds of economic development types of projects with the funding. So what 1772 does is they fund feasibility studies for startup organizations that want to get interested in this. And they also fund projects, individual projects that organizations may come up with. They get organizations started with capitalization of funds. So some of these grants were over $100,000 to capitalize funds. And then if those funds run low over a period of time, let's say the organizations are successful and they've got projects, but when they recycle the project, they may not make back all the money that they actually put into the project. So they begin to run at a little bit of a deficit when they revolve. The 1772 Foundation recapitalizes on a grant basis those funds so they can keep on going. So it's very interesting. And I think we have found that this is one of the major catalysts for saving buildings now across the country, rather than the other tools that have been used in the past. It's a major, when I say it's a major tool for saving places. So I think it'd be terrific for South Kingstown to get going on this. But it's not going to be easy. They seems like the funding that you can attract from organizations like 1772 sort of require you to have sort of something already started that has some legitimacy. So it's kind of hard to start something from the very beginning with funding. It's like a catch-22. How do you get started and become legitimate without any funding, or how do you get that funding to start?
Rich, is the legitimacy piece when you see it? Is it legitimacy in that they've successfully got a project they've already done, or is it legitimacy of the organization, or is it a track record of historic?
It's sort of a combination
projects?
Of legitimacy of the organization as having some staying power. It's got a sort of a board and a budget, and it hasn't been falling down. It's sort of like successful organization, because when you think about it, you're beginning to invest more funds in the organization to do major work. And so you want to be sure that the organization has some staying power. It's not just going to fold up its tent and walk away. And it's competitive. So you have to sort of get to that place where you're fundable and you can attract funding. So I think some of the organizations that I was reviewing that are attractive have had some history behind them. They've been in an organization for some period of time. They've done some projects of, maybe small, but they've completed those projects successfully. Having a municipality involved at some level, and the kind of acceptance within the community, or probably advocacy on the part of the municipality, I would think would be good, very important. Important to realize that it's a partnership, perhaps, or some sort of effort that has the backing of the municipal government. So that aspect, I think, is very positive. So that I think I would like to be on the committee. It gets to be a little bit of a conflict for me because I'm also sitting on the board of a grant maker that plays very heavily in this. But I can.
On the other
provide
hand,
some
you're the one who
information.
knows the most about it.
Yeah. And I'm just beginning to learn more about it too.
I'm new to this discussion. Professionally, have intersected with this kind of work a lot, so I have a pretty good understanding of it. Can you explain to me, Kayla, where South Kingstown, what concerns you're thinking a revolving fund could address a little more specifically? Because there are different models of revolving funds. I just want to get a sense of
Yeah, sure.
what problems you think this
Yeah.
revolving fund that you're thinking about would address.
Yeah, I would, okay, so I have an interest in seeing a revolving loan fund that helps people basically address fire code and life safety issues in property in historic buildings that's making them underutilize the space inside of it. I would also have an interest in seeing revolving loan funds that help facade improvement in projects because they have a benefit sort of beyond just that structure alone. There's a community value and a character value that benefits in that. And then I would also love to see it in the situation where there's a building that is structurally potentially going to be lost and that the owners are not able to come up with the funds to fix it. So those are sort of those are three, I suppose, honestly, levels of different funding you would sort of see go there. But I know revolving loan funds often work or in the start of research, and Shanti, I am very much at the start of learning about these. I see very much that they want to have sort of a success project that has a sort of a big win feeling to it, right? This building was unused, it was vacant, it was this, it was that, and now it is sort of back to its full vision of itself. And so I think it's important to have that too, but I would envision it to be something that would also help with smaller items too for properties. I would like to see, and I don't know if this is a realistic expectation, but I would very much like to see it be something that could address a $20,000 issue that somebody's got going on that might relate to the facade or to some specific element of the building, just as much as a large project to redo the entirety of something. That is my interest. My interest is me alone though, so I'm curious what other people's interests or ideas on it are.
I can give you an example of one in New Orleans, which is very interesting because it dovetails with a situation with their local historic district commission. And what they were finding was that this is the Preservation Resource Center of New Orleans. They were finding that in this neighborhood that there was a compliance problem with building code violations and HDC regulation. In the neighborhoods, a low-income neighborhood, residents felt that they could not afford to comply with the standards, like our standards, to restore porches, for instance, or other life safety kind of aspects that the building official was citing. So envision a simple New Orleans shotgun type house, single story with a shed porch on the front of it. And the owners, the porch is falling down, the owners couldn't afford to upgrade that porch or put it back together again or reconstruct it, however you want to think about the terminology, to what we would require in terms of, the correct columns. They could put up perhaps some metal lolly columns and put some plywood into it and make it safe, but they couldn't fix it to the HTC standards. So what this organization, the Preservation Resource Center, wants is funding in a revolving fund to loan to these homeowners so that in fact they can upgrade, they can meet the code issues that they're being cited for. Of course, there are fines involved with being in code violation. So they want to get out of that, give them some money to fix these porches and other features up to meet the code and satisfy the get the Historic District Commission out of sort of bad PR, because the neighborhood sees them as the culprits for not allowing them to fix their porches in a cost-effective way. Isn't that, I thought it was incredibly interesting. And that's how a revolving fund in that particular case could help out and be a win-win across the board. So that's not happening in Kingston, but it may be the thought that in Wakefield, that's exactly where we would be going if we had historic district zoning. That's sort of interesting comparison.
Mhm.
Well, I'd be happy to be on a subcommittee or something to work on this. I think it does need to be teased out where in South Kingstown this would make sense. And what you're describing in my mind is a little bit more of a commercial district need.
Mhm.
But no, I mean, I certainly think it's worth delving into.
And this is Karen. I love the idea. Absolutely love the idea, because I think there is a few problems out there. And I think this would be a great tool to offer the community. So if I have no experience in it, but would love to be part of it if you guys would have me.
Rich, did the 1772 Foundation fund any municipal governments that have revolving funds, or all nonprofit organizations?
Well, I had begun to look into that, and we can't really fund, we can only fund other 501c3s. We can't really fund municipal government. But this relationship could be one in which, the government is like a backstop or takes some other interest,
Right.
With the nonprofit and helps the nonprofit. I mean, there are CDCs and relationships that revolving funds can have with community development block grant, and I think the Providence Revolving Fund has done a great deal in terms of some of these partnerships with the city of Providence. And there are probably other examples elsewhere where sort of like a hand in glove kind of situation where the municipality and a healthy nonprofit. I mean, fundamentally, organizations that are sort of normal in the preservation world, like the Providence Preservation Society or Historic Houston or any of these groups that I'm looking at from other states, they want to have a relationship that's supportive with the local municipality. That's when things really get kicked off, when you really have a lot of momentum and good community spirit. They can also have relationships, and they should have, with merchants organizations or downtown. A lot of these organizations that I'm reviewing have connections with the Main Street Center and the National Trust for Historic Preservation. And in fact, the National Main Street Center, which now has a new name, forgotten it. Shanti, you probably probably know that name. Main Street America. Here it is. They're receiving revolving funds from 1772 to take on pilot programs in Maine and in other locations. So it's kind of cool. So you have a national Main Street organization doing revolving fund work.
think the challenge here is what's, and so I suppose the subcommittee will help tease that out a little bit, but there's at the moment no obvious or established nonprofit that could be the vehicle. Is there? Am I missing something?
No, I don't think there is. And to be honest with you, Shanti, that's what I want, sort of hope to have a subcommittee start doing, is saying, okay, like what are the principal 3 or 4 questions we have to say whether or not this is something we keep putting work into for a continual period of time, or are there fundamental roadblocks right there to begin with like that? If we can't figure out sort of who that nonprofit entity is that we can work with, then we sort of have a clear stop there that, it's not worth us continuing to invent a program and put a lot of work into something that can't lift, but that we start to sort of just identify what are those first things that we need to do. And then the subcommittee comes together and bats those around to say, okay, who do we know of, who is out there? How can we outreach to them and see if, if somebody might be interested or have the capacity, and start to just sort of run those things to ground to either keep the project afloat or know that it's a more of a long-term vision for us that might be a few years down the road, but start to figure out what is that frame we need to start doing and what are those essential things we need to do to figure out whether or not this is a tool that we can employ in South Kingstown now, or whether we need to be looking for other tools. Because at the end of the day, my goal is not necessarily solely to see a revolving loan fund happen. At the end of the day, my goal is to see us find more ways to proactively bring resources to owners of historic properties to keep them intact. And so if it's not the revolving loan fund, if we run this to ground and we're a few subcommittee meetings deep and we realize, great idea, but we're just not there yet, then we'll put a bookmark in this one and think about what the next tool is to pursue. That's what I see happening here. I would love to see us run this one to ground because it's something that's been, since I've been working here, been being brought up. And so it's something that I think I've heard enough about to know, okay, let's see what the viability of that is or isn't, and whether it's a tool for our toolbox.
I'll just say the South County History Center is, it's beyond our capacity to have something like that. But certainly, assistance with research or ideas, we're, definitely happy to help in any way we can. Just to do a revolving fund ourselves, it would be way beyond what we could ever administer.
I think, Erica, and just full disclosure, I'm on the board of the South County History Center. I think in the subcommittee, the question might be asked, well, so here's an organization that's a well-established and funded, or entity in the community. What would it take for them to be able to do that? What would it take for South County History Center to be able to do that? And that having Rich at the table would be interesting, the 1772 fund to the level that could make that a possible and workable arrangement. I'm not asking for an answer now. I'm just saying, I think, we could dig into any number of opportunities that exist and ask what would that organization need to get to the point to be a partner with the town on a revolving fund.
I'm going to break in just for a minute. I'm going to be leaving the meeting in a couple of minutes. Carolyn.
So I suppose I'm gonna jump in and just say, I've heard from Rich and Shanti and Karen that they'd be interested in being in a subcommittee on this. The question is whether or not there's anybody else who wants to be. And if not, maybe the next thing to do is, I think we should get it really should probably be a motion and a second to establish a subcommittee to do this with the members on it who are interested in being on it. And then that might sort of resolve us for tonight on this topic. And then we will move from there in a subcommittee that reports back in August what we've sort of found or researched and where we sit at our next full HDC meeting.
All right, could we have a motion for that? Somebody put a motion up.
Well, I'll make a motion, not bashful, that we establish a subcommittee to look into revolving loan fund opportunities in South Kingstown.
And this is Karen De Silva. I'll second it.
All right, and let's have a vote on that. Let's see, so I guess Martinez?
Aye.
I'm still here.
Oh,
Griswold's still here.
Go ahead, Carolyn.
Gone, but not forgotten. Yes, I.
Okay, Youngkin,
Aye.
Stedman,
Aye.
De Silva,
Aye.
Garfield, aye. Motion's carried to form a subcommittee. All right, I think the people on that subcommittee are the ones who, the members of the commission who are most up on that kind of a thing. So I think that's a good start.
My computer fell. I don't know if anyone just saw that. That was embarrassing. My apologies. That sounds great. So those three of us those three of you on that subcommittee, I'll shoot you an email in the next few weeks. We can figure out sort of a time that works for us to Zoom together a few more times in between now and then. I think you'll find I think it works well when subcommittees have sort of a specific question that they're answering each time they come together, because I'm a person of structure. But we don't have to do it my way. It's for you all too. So but the first one probably I'll put forward a couple of those first questions. Who is a nonprofit that we might be interested in, and what are the specific sort of areas of focus we would see it be working in? And just a couple of those to focus a conversation for an hour or so on it.
I would just like to say, having missed the last meeting, what a surprise it was to find myself back in the chairman's seat.
That's a reflection on how good a job you're doing. That's all.
I was sort of hoping somebody else would jump into the lurch here. All right. I guess we just need a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
I'll second that.
Second. All in favor? I don't think we need a voice vote here. All in favor? Aye.
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 All right, motion's carried. This was a very strange way to have a meeting.
It was. Thank you all for the flexibility of Zoom. I've been living in Zoom meetings, I think, and I repeat myself a lot. They're clunky, they're awkward, they're a little staged, but strangely enough, you start to get used to them. Good or bad as that may be. Thank you guys all for being here, though, because I know
that we don't have to get
very different way. Exactly. It's not the committee role you signed up for, but so. And then also one last final thought. Welcome to Shanti officially for joining us. We're very, very, very glad to have you.
Yes.
Yeah, pleasant surprise to see you here, Shanti.
Very cool.
Look forward to meeting you all in person at some point. Those of you whom I don't know.
Same.
That's right. You didn't get introduced to everybody, but that'll have to happen when we meet live, right?
Next year.
Thank you so much.
right.
Here's to next year.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Nice to see you
Good
guys.
night.
Yeah, good night. Good to see you.